Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the FMCG Guys. I'm actually based in the Hive Group London office. This is Daniel Torres, by the way. I didn't even say my name. Hi, Efrain. How are you doing? Connecting from Paris, I assume?
I am. You're very mobile this week, Daniel.
I am. Sometimes I feel like it would be great that it were always like this, and sometimes I feel like it would be great if I just stayed in Barcelona relaxing. Still working a lot, but relaxing at home. But had a lot of fun in London this week with some great events, great meetings. Come here to the Hive Group's office to set up this podcast. So very excited about the star lineup of guests we have. I think it's the first time, right, Efrain, that we have 3 people joining us, so it's a total of 5 of us here.
I think so. I mean, we've done some joint episodes with our friends across the Atlantic, the CPG guys, where we've had 4 of us. But this is definitely, I think, the most we've had at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me introduce our guest, of course. First of all, we have Ben Miller from Shoptalk. Then we have Stijn Demeersseman from Amazon, which some of you may know because he was on the show earlier this year. And then finally we have Simon Miles from Coca-Cola, who's not been on the show, but he has been on the CPG Guys recently. And from what I've heard, with a lot of success in terms of audiences. So hi, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Perfect. So maybe to give the audience a bit of context, it would be great if you can all very quickly introduce yourselves. So maybe we can start with you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Miller. I am Director of Original Content for the Shoptalk Group. So the whole portfolio, that's Shoptalk US, Shoptalk Fall coming in October 2024. Our grocery shop, which is our FMCG specific show that we run in the autumn in Las Vegas, and Shoptalk Europe. And I actually, at the moment, I'm covering the role of content director for Shoptalk Europe as well. So that's my role. My job is to bring new insights, new perspectives, new knowledge, and to work with our great partners around the world to bring new insights on the retail world to all of our show attendees.
I like the fact that it's you're the OC of Shoptalk.
Absolutely. I've been with Shoptalk for just over a year, so I can't quite claim to be the OG, but I am definitely the OC.
There you go. That's a start. No, but just 1 year, Ben. It feels like more. So good on you for the presence. Stijn Demeersseman, welcome again. How are you?
Yeah, very good. It's always good to be with you guys, and I always love to listen to your podcasts. I always learn 1, 2, 3 things every time I listen to the podcast. There's the diversity of people you have. It's fascinating. So kudos to you guys, how you bring the industry together. And of course, yes, I'm an FMCG fan. I have done 25 years of FMCG. It's true. I've now went to another industry, so I'm now in the fashion world. But it's interesting to see how much similarities there are between the industries, because it's all about how do you connect with your customers, your consumers, how do you build brands, how do you build value for your customers. So there's a lot of similarities between industries, and of course I love that part of getting close to the heart of our customers and building love brands, and that's what I'm doing now. So my current role is the chief of staff for Amazon Fashion Europe. I'm kind of the OG, to use Ben's terms, but I'm kind of helping our business. I'm the strategic advisor to our VP, trying to identify opportunities in terms of strategic growth areas. How can I help the organization to run more efficiently? How can I help our teams? But I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But good to be here. Thank you for inviting Efrain and Daniel.
Pleasure to have you, Stijn. And last but not least, hi, Simon Miles. Maybe you can also give some context to the probably short portion of the audience who doesn't know you yet.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's great to be with you. So I currently have the role of Vice President of Omni-Channel Customer Platforms, which is one of the longest job titles you've probably had on the podcast so far. What that really means is I work across all of our regions around the world to coordinate our strategy with our retail customers and our food service customers, as well as our B2B customers. So, I'm in a privileged position where I get to see lots and lots of different kind of business models and the way that we work with our customers. And I'm really the person who sort of sits at the center of all that. So we've got lots of people in local markets and regions who are really the experts who do the hard work. I'm just the one who kind of coordinates and leads some of the strategy and the thinking. So it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, I think given this esteemed panel of guests that we have today, I think time would be well served. And I think our audience would appreciate if we spent a little time talking about what trends we're seeing, particularly here in Europe. So one that immediately comes to mind, I'd love to get the perspectives from the group, is around unified commerce. And I know it goes by a lot of different names depending on which company you're working with, but I think it actually dovetails really nicely with what you were talking about, Simon, with regards to omni-channel customer platforms. I'm curious to get your perspectives in regards to what you've been seeing, particularly here in Europe as of late, around this concept.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, apart from the fact that I probably do need to change my job title because omnichannel is not going to cut the mustard anymore, so I'm going to need to look at that. But we've seen a lot of development, and as I see it, it's a bit of a sort of the next stage of evolution, really, where we were starting to think about e-commerce and stores as separate things, and then they were starting to think multi-channel and ultimately omnichannel. And now, really, I think because of the unifying nature of the ecosystems that our retail partners are building and the data that comes with that, the ability to really think about the shoppers and consumers are the key people here, and how you can, help them to have a better shopping experience, whether that's, faster, cheaper, better, whatever that looks like. That seems to me to be at the heart of the trend towards unified commerce, that actually we're starting to get to a place where the consumer is the really key person here, and that whichever way they choose to shop, wherever they go, where they start or end their journey, then we're just here to kind of serve them and to help them make the right choices that we can. So in my mind, that's where I think a lot of the drive towards this term of unified commerce is coming from.
That's interesting, because I just heard somebody saying, we can't say multi-channel anymore. We have to say omni-channel. You're going a step forward, but I think it makes sense, actually.
And I think that's one of the things that we've picked up in some of the conversations that many of the conversations we've had, that there is the gravity pulling towards unified commerce as a term, for exactly what Simon mentioned, that it puts the shopper and thinking about the shopper journey at the heart of the conversation. Omnichannel, despite it being a mouthful and a kind of an abuse of the English language, what it actually does, it still talks about channels, which is, an internal, it's a retail term. And we know that shoppers don't think about channels. And increasingly, shoppers are, expecting to be able to have the same and consistent experience of a brand or a retailer or whatever touch point they find it. And in grocery, in FMCG, we're probably a bit behind where some of the other sectors are. So I think it's quite interesting, then you'll move to fashion. Fashion brands are definitely ahead in this space. So the opportunity to find transferable learnings and how you take, it's great if you're in a luxury category and you've got high consideration and you're used to an employee in store being able to serve you and you can tool and give clienteling advice to that employee to be able to unlock a personalized experience. Well, you can't do that in a grocery store, but you can do that online. You can increasingly recognize people, and the tech stack to be able to do that in stores, it's starting to be built as well. So I think this drive definitely feels, consumer and shopper focused, which is really exciting. And Stijn, it'd be really interesting if you're already picking up some kind of new learnings from your couple of weeks in the fashion world, or yet.
No, you're spot on there. I think we always say it within Amazon. We always think customer backwards. Any initiative, any new what we famously call the PR FAQs, which is kind of our 6-page document. When we start thinking about any new idea, it always starts with how is this addressing a customer opportunity, a customer pain point. So that working customer backwards is literally ingrained in everything we do. And every time I hear about, unified commerce, and I'm like, okay, but what is different to what we're already doing? And yes, of course, it's going. I think it's just always continuously raising the bar of how are we making the life for a customer more, how we improving the customer experience, how we make the life for a customer better, easier, more convenient, but also more inspirational. And that I think is always the trade-off to find about how do you make, on the one hand, shopping convenient, but also still inspirational. Mm-hmm. And of course, your question, Ben, was now me going to the world of fashion. Of course, the inspirational element, the lifestyle element, becomes even more important. And that I think that brands in the fashion world, but not only in the fashion world, in the beauty world, have done a great job over the last years to become even better, to use their unified commerce to actually build a complete love brand for their customers and their consumers. And that I think is what unified commerce can do. It's to dial up that love element and to stay closer connected to the hearts of the customers. And ultimately, if you look at what we do with Amazon on a day-to-day basis, it's our unified commerce would probably be called different, but it's how we integrate from the way you experience our app all the way that you pick up your product in an Amazon locker, or you will have it delivered to your doorstep. That's our unified commerce experience. Yes, you have an element there of physical stores, but that's still a smaller part of what Amazon would do. But yes, it's important how we think about our one grocery experience in our physical stores, on the grocery app, with our partners that we operate with, like it would be Morrison's in the UK as an example.
Yeah, will be interesting to hear from you, Stijn, because we have a lot of people that go from FMCG to fashion, but not many people that do the other way around. So it will be interesting to hear from you. I know that you're quite new in the role now at fashion, but in some months' time or a couple of years' time, what are the key learnings that FMCG can take from fashion? No? Because I think that customer centricity is maybe more there in some ways.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you ask the question, because of course the first thing you do when you go into a new role is you go through your LinkedIn's and you say, okay, who do I know in this new industry? Yeah, and my first assessment was, I don't know anyone. It's a completely different industry. It's like any FMCG company. I probably know someone from the networks of Shoptalk or others that we've worked with in the past, either directly as a colleague or just by knowing them from conferences. My first assessment was fashion world. It's a very different world. The more, and I'm only there 6 weeks now, the more I actually go deep, there's a lot of FMCG people, to your point, who are in the fashion industry. And it's about bringing this fast-moving mentality, both how you work with your between retailers and how you work internally. How do you train and coach your own talents? How do you work with your agencies and your wider ecosystem of stakeholders? A lot of that can be learned from out of FMCG industry to be brought into fashion. The other way around, which was your point you wanted to raise, is I think the FMCG world can learn a lot in terms of that. Yes, unified commerce, and how do you build brands, which the fashion industry is doing on an exemplary way on their D2C platform, on the D2C sites, in their stores. The customer service element. How do they make sure that the customer picks the right product? So in fashion, we call it the fit challenge. So you want to pick the right size. So how do you bring that into an FMCG world to pick the right products? I don't know, the flavors of Simon's Coca-Cola, to pick the right one that you want. I think we can learn a lot from the fashion world. It's that customer service element that has a very high bar.
Yeah, I would, it's funny. I was having a conversation with an agency just yesterday who does an experiential agency, and they were talking about how when they work with fashion clients, they move at a much different pace in regards to like, things have to come together in the matter of days, not months or weeks. So I think that, like you said, the way of working is something where I think, we could learn from, we as FMCG could learn from the fashion industry. And I think also, to your point earlier, the inspiration element of it as well. I mean, I think one thing that as an admirer, somebody who hasn't worked in fashion, I admire what they can do in terms of like being able to dial up that inspiration around a lot of their brands and products as well. So, I think a lot for FMCG brands to learn there also.
I think one of the really interesting, challenges on the idea of unified commerce is exactly how you link that demand creation and inspiration activity with commerce, with conversion activity. Simon, I'd love to hear any perspectives you have at Coke about, obviously you sit within the commercial functions. Historically, a lot of the brand, Coca-Cola, a big investor in brand building. How are you trying to bring the two together? Because unified, blurs, social activity. How do you convert all social? Anything that you're doing there to try and kind of bridge this gap?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, because it's another one, I think, where you can look outside of FMCG for a bit of inspiration. And I think that apart from fashion, I think health and beauty is another one that you can look at. There's some really good lessons there in the way that they've thought about how they engage their customers and give them a good experience, either in a physical store environment or, in fact, through things like social commerce. They've been really strong in that way, and they've adopted, augmented reality and some of those kind of technology innovations to really give people a really enhanced experience. So it's not just tech for tech's sake, but actually it's been something that's useful to the shopping experience. And so we've certainly sort of tried to look at some inspirations like that and think, how do we apply that to whether that's new packaging and how they launch new products and different kind of varieties of some of our categories products, but also the notion of no dead ends. So whatever media you're putting out there should have the ability at some point to transact. So don't just put media out there that just sits there and goes, well, that was nice, but then you can't actually transact from it. And I think that's one of the areas that we've definitely kind of looked to some other sectors to say, how do we copy some of that stuff and how do we take the inspiration and rethink that for a category like soft drinks? So you'll definitely see us, I think, do even more of that in the future. So that it becomes much more transactable, no matter what form of media, whether that's a pack, whether it's, social, whether it's, something else. I think that's, some of the ways that we're certainly thinking about that evolution. And I'm sure one of the other hot topics we'll talk about later is retail media. And that's another one where, that's helping to fuel that kind of thinking and the ability to transact, in parts of the shopping journey that probably weren't open to that before.
Yes, you're completely right. So I'm in London now, as I mentioned before, and I just went to 2 retail media events this week that were completely full. And they lasted a few hours, and at the end of the event, practically nobody was on the phone and everybody was still listening. So it's obviously a topic that's causing a lot of interest. Simon, as you mentioned, how have you seen this space evolve in the last couple of years for you guys at Coke? I mean, and obviously we've seen how like groceries have turned their online platforms into effective media channels, right? But tell us a bit more, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of the hottest topics that we're working with as we speak. And I think, the way I think about it, and there's been a couple of really good pieces of work produced in the last, few months or so. So there was a white paper done by the University of Arkansas, which I think was a really helpful introduction, where they spoke to a lot of different brands around the world, a lot of different retailers in terms of where they saw how they were using it, how they saw the space developing and so on. And then more recently, there was a piece by the IAB in terms of retail buyer's guide, but also, around metrics and stuff, because I think the promise of retail media is pretty clear to most people. So, it should be good news for shoppers because they should be getting more relevant and personalized media right in front of them. And that will help enhance the shopping experience, the way, the sort of thing that Stijn was talking about earlier. I think for retailers, it's pretty obvious, in terms of revenue stream that's high margin potentially and adds to the bottom line for their businesses. And then brands get the ability to to target in a way that wasn't possible before, as well as the whole notion of closed loop reporting, right? So, you can for once and for all start to measure the impact of your marketing spend in a way you haven't been able to in the past. And I think that has grown, that notion has really grown, and you'll see, from all number of different organizations forecasts in terms of the amount of revenue that is already being spent in retail media, actually led by Stijn and the work that the guys at Amazon are doing, but, way out ahead of most players. Yeah. But lots of people also, moving into that space, you say across all of the European big retailers, launching their own offerings in increasing levels of sophistication. However, what I would say is where we're at today, there are still, a number of significant challenges that as an industry we have to face. And I think, if I just give you a couple of good examples, I think one is around the notion of organizational silos and how that is a real barrier to success. And that those silos exist both on the sort of brand side as well as within the retailers. So, the ability to break down some of those in terms of how you work and who needs to be at the table and what sorts of conversations you need to have between, marketing, media, the commercial, the sales teams and so on. And all of those people probably have their own budgets, right? So that's one of the other just very practical challenges that trip us up all the time in terms of being able to kind of get after it. And I think the other big one is around measurement and the real ability to genuinely measure an attribute in a consistent way across the industry. Because what we see at the moment is it's almost like a gold rush, if you like, in the last couple of years where there's the opportunities really obvious for people. And so, let's build it and let's, build it as we go and just iterate. And that's great for speed. But what's happened is that a lot of the networks are built in their own way and they're not necessarily very easy to compare across like for like. So if you're a brand and you've got $100 to spend, right? Where do you spend that at the moment? There's already 600 retail media networks up and running. And so it's a mind-boggling kind of choice that you have to make. And so we have to get a better handle, I think, on what we mean by certain terms, what we mean by definitions, what the standards are for metrics and measurement, so that we can get a better handle on how we go back to our own boards and our own senior leadership to say, this is working, this is the return on investment we're seeing, this is why we should be continuing to invest or invest at higher levels or whatever. Because the alternative, it just doesn't work for me. If we don't know and it's highly fragmented, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the kind of growth levels that we've seen. And so there's still much work to do, but I would say there's been enormous progress as well. And you've got to recognise, the great work from the likes of Amazon, from the likes of Tesco, from the likes of Sainsbury's, Carrefour, whole Delhaize. There's lots of really good examples across the European sort of retailer landscape that I think are getting into a good place. But boy, there's a long way to go because it's such a fast-moving, fascinating area for sure.
Yeah, some of these players have been on the podcast. Carrefour, you haven't been on yet. So if you want to come, you know where to find us. Please contact us, Carrefour. Stijn, from your perspective at Amazon, so you're the kings and the pioneers of retail media. What do you have to say about all this?
Can we have a podcast of 4 hours just for... No, look, one of my hobbies in Amazon is that's probably the reason why I joined Amazon, and I'm a pretty unique profile within Amazon. It's I'm actually trying to solve one of the challenges Simon was describing. So yes, our advertising organization and our stores organization, so what we call our retail organization, it's two different worlds apart. But my role is for Europe to bring both organizations together. So I'm orchestrating all the different activities we're doing between both worlds within Amazon. Is how can we partner better with brands? How can we partner better with agencies? How can we partner better internally to solve the challenge that Simon was describing? So that silo world is definitely there, and I would say already versus where we were last year with Shoptalk as an example, and already today there is already a lot of evolution, and I'm confident when we're going to meet again in 6 months from now, it's going to have evolved again dramatically. Because every day you open up your LinkedIn feed, you open up any press article, there's a lot of good ideas out there. What does, sorry to use the word frustrates me, what does frustrate me, just to use it, is that 90%, if not 99% of people see it as tactical. see it as a revenue stream, and see it as short-term. And I think we're completely missing the strategic opportunity in this conversation. And it all again starts back from thinking from the customer in our language, or from the consumer backwards, and about what are the insights, and retail media needs to bring a solution to that. And then my argument is, of course, that the retail media is uniquely placed to bring that solution in terms of incrementality, in terms of how do you bring your innovation to market, how do you drive premiumization, how do you drive basket size, etc., etc. And that discussion is not happening sufficiently. And I see some great, you mentioned, Simon, in the beauty also, great initiatives being taken about how do you bring your brand in front of the Gen Z community through Roblox, in our world through Twitch, and how do you bring that, not unified commerce, but how do you bring that unified brand experience from what you have as your own brand media channels as a brand, and how do you work with, if I take the suite of offer we give to brands in terms of live sports, how do you work with Twitch, how do you work with Amazon Audible, how do you work with, indeed, in our fresh stores, and what you're going to put on the bags at checkout, and how do you work with our sponsored products, sponsored brands, sponsored video. So the multitude of tools you have at your disposal to actually build your brand, not in a tactical way about, okay, I'm going to shift some ads dollars, but in a strategic way, that conversation is not happening sufficiently, if you ask me. And you can only have that conversation, indeed, if you bring the right parties around the table. You cannot have that conversation at a tactical level. You need to have that conversation at a strategic level with the people who are close to the brand from an FMCG side, but also the people who are close to the customer experience, the people who own the customer experience at the retailer side. And these people hardly meet. And it's these people you need to connect.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that, Stijn. It's a really good build. And for me, I think it's one of the biggest collaboration opportunities that the FMCG industry has had for decades, probably, because for exactly that reason, if you think about it really hard, it is a strategic opportunity, not a tactical one. And actually, the way to think about it is back to that point we were talking about earlier. It's about the consumer experience, actually. It's about doing this for consumers. And if we keep that in mind, we have to work together in a different way. I don't think anybody on their own is going to solve the challenges here, because it's just complex, right? It's new, and there's lots of new things going on. But together, I think we've got all the answers. It's just a case of really getting a different set of people at the table to have a proper grown-up strategic conversation that is aimed at giving consumers a better experience. If that's the mindset you go in with, I think we win. If we don't, and then the consumer doesn't get a better experience, then we've all failed, frankly.
So on a practical level, Simon, Stijn, you guys, you're going back to the OG. You guys are the OGs at retail media. We talked about having the right people around the table. To get a question to both of you for advice to anyone listening, who are those people that should be around the table? How do you start breaking down these silos? What does best practice look like in terms of making this happen?
But if the question is to me, you need to have four, if you want to simplify the conversation, you need to have four people around the table. You need to have and let me put titles there, but bear with me, the titles, of course, for interpretation. You need to have the chief marketing officer, the person who owns the brand at the brand side, and you need to have the person who owns the commercial experience, the chief commercial officer from brand side. And from an Amazon side, you need to have the Amazon advertising expert who sees the full funnel all the way from or upper funnel brand products all the way to the sponsored product experience, as well as your category leader would be your commercial person at Amazon side. That's the core team you need to have around the table, because only these people can see the full funnel from media channels, but also from commercial channels. And back to your earlier point, if we don't solve for that challenge together, what we will do is we will not solve for the challenge of cognitive overload. We will just bombard our consumers with instead of previously a lot of TV copies and a lot of GRPs, we will bombard them with a lot of sponsored activities. We will bombard them with a lot of new screens in stores. And in today's world, when it's all about, okay, bring me calm, bring me peace, help me, rather than bombard me with even more stuff, I think if the retail media world fast forward in 5 years from now, if the conclusion will be we've bombarded our consumers with even more stuff and more screens, then we will have failed. So, and I think we're going in that direction, to be honest, because we see it tactically. And therefore, we need to pivot to more strategic. So long answer to your question, Ben, but so these are the people you need to have around the table.
And I think it's fascinating that you talk about having a CMO around the table, because one of the things that this focus on tactics definitely feels like it's doing. And if I think back to grocery shopping in Las Vegas last month, the amount of conversation around bottom of the funnel and conversion and swapping products versus top of the funnel, demand creation, grow the pie, great inspiration. It was, there's a real bias right now. The retail media is becoming tactical and dragging focus and spend to the bottom of the funnel rather than getting the balance that we talked about earlier. Sorry, Simon, what's your view on who should be around the table?
Yeah, pretty aligned with what Stijn was saying, to be honest. I mean, on the FMCG side, yes, you'd want the brand people. I think there's a media person probably involved, and whether that would be from an agency or whether that's an internal person depends on your structure, right, and how you work. Certainly, the customer team lead or commercial person is right. And then it's a category / insight. So I think we're got a similar view of the key players. But I think you've got to be thinking three-dimensionally here. So there's probably a senior level discussion which bases the thing, which is where Stein's notion of your CMO talking. We've got to think differently about top to top or strategic conversations that set the right things in motion, and then the players on the ground who activate this stuff day in, day out have got to build the right programs. And that, again, that'll probably be a slightly bigger list of people, but, drawn from the same pools, I think. And so we've just got to think through how we set the right framework up here for success. And that we have a similar idea and the ability to compare as well. So back to the point I was talking about earlier around, standards. So, imagine from a CMO's point of view, the choices you've got are all the traditional challenges you've always had, right? So whether that's TV, outdoor, cinema, radio, et cetera, through to in-store stuff, as well as now a whole bunch of other new media touch points available through the retailer networks. And so to make the choices and say, well, how do those traditional ones stack up with the new ones I'm being offered? You've got to have some comparability there. So we've got to help the decision-making for the likes of a CMO or a chief commercial officer or whoever, the people are, to make the right decisions that say, some of the time I want to build programs which might be, about, an amazing asset that we have. So, think about Coke, right, where we have amazing sponsorship assets from time to time, things like, FIFA World Cups or Olympic Games and those kind of things. Great. But actually what I'm more interested in is the week in, week out shopping trip that you've got people going in and buying for meals and for their families. That's where I think it's really going to be powerful and where we're going to be able to think through the right touch points and the right things to activate to just make the shopping experience that much better. So they find what they're looking for more quickly and they get the best deal that they're looking for at the right time as well. And it shows up at exactly the right moment in which they are, choosing to go shopping, whether that's on a device or whether it's in a physical outlet. And so, thinking through all of that, I think is going to take some strategic thinking of some power on both sides. And again, back to the point, we got to do this together.
So one of the things that I think that is getting a lot of buzz, a lot of play these days in terms of being a means to be able to help to do some of that wiring that you both have been referring to is AI, right? We couldn't talk about any podcast without mentioning AI and tech. And actually, one of the questions that I want to pose to you all is, from your perspectives, how do you, as we would say, put my American hat on for a second, separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, in regards to being able to tell what's real versus what's vaporware in terms of AI, and being able to use that in a productive way to be able to drive some of the changes that you guys have been referring to.
I mean, if I say about some of the things I'm seeing, there's a couple of things. I think it's, for me, what I'm seeing is it splits into two at the moment. Most of the stuff I'm seeing is actually about, you don't see it as a shopper or a consumer. It's behind the scenes. It's about efficiency and operational pluses, right? So you see a lot of work in terms of thinking about logistics and supply chain planning and those kind of things, right? Demand forecasting, etc. We're certainly doing a lot of work in that space, and I know a lot of the the retail partners that we work with around the world are also heavily invested in that space. And AI is really unlocking some amazing kind of efficiencies in that space pretty fast, and also in terms of being built into other parts of the ecosystem. So whether that's camera technology, which is helping replenishment routines in stores and those kind of things, right? So I'm seeing quite a lot of work going into that, which I think is really starting to pay off for people, and will continue, I guess, get more and more sophisticated. I see less of it out front, if you like, front of house. But, we are starting to see things emerge in terms of things like search, so you look at what someone like Instacart is doing or Carrefour is doing around how they're enhancing their search engine capability through the use of artificial intelligence and the likes of, the sort of chat GPT type technology coming in. So rather than have to search item by item, you can start to build a basket by, who's in your household, how many meals you're trying to solve for, those kind of things, right? So it's more mission-based, more natural language. So I think that's a really interesting one that's likely to stick and keep developing. And so I'm pleased to see some of that. We're obviously also, as an organization, you may have seen, worked on it from more of a marketing point of view. So, there's been a lot of work go into people using artificial intelligence to build brand campaigns with us, sort of crowdsourced creative and that kind of stuff, which I think is just, super interesting in terms of where that's going to take us and how it will develop our marketing campaigns over time, and how, we're kind of welcoming in, if you like, the user base, the people who are really passionate about the brands and really own the brands, not the company, it's the consumers at the end of the day, and using their inspiration as part of marketing, I think is a fascinating way that goes. So, lots of different ways that we're starting to see sort of AI play out in our space, which I think is just one of the most exciting developments I've seen for a long time.
And Stijn, over to you. I'm curious to hear, because in this world.
Again, another topic that could take 4 hours, so we need a whole conference for this. No, it's and that's why I think it's fascinating to be in this industry, because everything that's happening in that space. No, if you look at it from an Amazon perspective, and I'm not going to claim here that I'm going to say some official PR statement on behalf of our CEO, but I would say it's there already for a very long time. AI in our space. If you look today on your Amazon app. Things like products often bought together, or things like add to baskets. So if you buy an iPhone, you would also buy a charger or a head. That's all already driven by AI. That's not somewhere a human being will connect that. Yeah. So based upon other purchasing behavior, we were already always giving that. So the way we buy our stock, the way where we place our stock in our FC network across Europe, all of that was already driven by AI for many years. Yeah. Now, this being said, yes, there is a significant acceleration happening in multiple spaces, and yes, and everybody wants to be part of that game, and yes, and everybody in Amazon is fighting for resources and prioritization. What I see happening, and of course in my role today, I'm close to these discussions, is we will always take customer first. So if we need to prioritize resources, investments, we will always think about how can we even further improve the customer experience, make it more convenient. Simon mentioned search as an example, but how can we make it even more convenient for a customer to pick the right product so they don't have to return? Yeah, again, in the fashion world, you don't want customers having to return the product, so you want to make it as you want to give them the right choice. Yeah, and so then. Yes, we do a lot for our vendors and our sellers. Amazon is a difficult retailer to work with. Yeah, it's not as easy as if you would work with a brick and mortar retailer. So how can we help even more the key account manager out there, the agencies out there who work as a selling partner, to simplify their work by giving them recommendations on the things to improve on, again, improving the customer experience, improving their end-to-end supply chain, etc. And then the last thing, of course, and again, in no specific order, but the last thing probably is how do we improve for our employees? Yeah, so how do we make the life for our employees easier, again, to navigate through all our different tools and databases to say, okay, well, if you do this, you will actually have the most impact into your results. So customers, vendor selling partners, and employees are probably the different stakeholders that AI will improve.
I mean, we did a very a deep dive on AI, particularly generative AI, going into grocery shop. And I think what the exciting thing right now is that we're starting to build up a whole series of use cases as people start to understand the value it's bringing to their organization. And I think there's 2 points that I've made. Number one, there's been a lot of noise and hype around Gen AI. I think, as Stijn just really eloquently talked about, AI in total has got, continues to have transformational capabilities and opportunities for the industry, none of which will be possible if it doesn't have the data to build it off. So it does go back to some of the real basics and fundamentals, like making sure you've got fantastic data. Secondly, on generative AI, some of you might have heard me with this analogy before. I draw the analogy right now to kind of that runaway train. And there's this runaway train that is accelerating, that nobody actually really knows where it's going, but everybody absolutely wants to feel that they're part of it. And if you don't get on now, you're going to miss it. So what does that really mean? It means that, there are some legislative, legal, cultural challenges with generative AI, how it works and how it could be managed. But yet, if we don't create cultures within organizations of testing, learning, experimenting, understanding the tools, understanding the potential, that by the time you have built that, other organizations will be miles ahead and that train will have run and they'll be delivering huge value. So having that balance between a positive culture of experimentation with getting guardrails right and understanding what you do and don't expose to your customers, as Simon has suggested, is I think, the crucial thing from our side on Gen AI.
So, Ben, we have Shoptalk Europe coming up. Well, coming up is a way of speaking. It's still, 6 months from now, a bit more, in between the 3rd and the 5th of June in my hometown, Barcelona. So thanks for making it easy for me to go there. So we've talked about retail media. We've talked about AI. We've talked about unified commerce. What other topics can we expect board members like Stijn and Simon and the other speakers to be talking about at the event? And also, let me ask you, playing devil's advocate, why should FMCG brands, suppliers and retailers come to the event?
First and foremost, what we are trying to achieve in Shoptalk, and whether that is here in Europe at Barcelona, whether that's our US shows, whether that's grocery shop, is to create a community. And our aspiration is to create the most progressive, the most dynamic community across retail to come together and solve challenges and answer questions around retail innovation and digital transformation. Build the future of the industry together is what we talk about. And the number of times during this conversation we've heard from Simon and Stijn talking about, there are challenges that we need to solve together, that nobody has the answer in isolation for. And if we talk about our show in Barcelona, there are incredible communities and forums right across Europe for individual sectors and individual countries. But we believe that there isn't anything that brings it together where you can have the leading fashion and apparel brands at the same conference as the leading FMCG brands and the leading home consumer electronics and home entertainment to all learn from each other. Because some of the core challenges, I was talking to a consumer electronics business yesterday who are really heavily investing in retail media. Some of the things we're trying to solve are the same outside of sector, and they're the same from country to country. And the opportunities to learn and collaborate from each other in a pan-European community, we believe, are absolutely huge. So that's why Shoptalk Europe exists. We are incredibly fortunate that we are steered in the conversations that we will be having by a fantastic advisory board. Stijn and Simon, with representing Coca-Cola and Amazon, are part of that advisory board. Other organizations that are on the board, whether it's Elodie, who is now CEO of Spain for Cafor, Jerome, who's Chief Innovation Officer at Decathlon, Isabella, who's the Global Retail Director at Camper, Hector, Chief Digital Officer at Elf Beauty, and that's just to name a few. We have an incredible board across the sector who are saying, yes, unified commerce, AI, adjacent revenue streams are important, but so too is changing consumer behavior, so too is demand creation, so too is what the innovative tech stack of the future is going to be needed to be able to activate and deliver against all of this. So those are the conversations that we will be having. Look, we're really proud to be launching Shoptalk Europe today. Just go to shoptalkeurope.com and for retailers and brands, you can get involved in our hosted program. We can financially support your attendance, and you can meet incredible and innovative manufacturer technology vendors who are there. Our full program, our 50 sessions and 50 hours of content, our sponsors and our incredible speakers are going to be built up over the next 8 months that we have. 8 months between now and 3rd to the 5th of June. So visit Shoptalk Europe and look, if anybody wants to understand how to get involved, why they should get involved, the opportunity to get involved, please just DM me on LinkedIn, and really happy to pick up conversations from any of the European FMCG community. I think we dedicated a quarter of the entire show content last year to FMCG and grocery. We'll be doing it again this year. There'll be 3 days of fantastic FMCG relevant content and some very senior and really interesting customers that brands will want to meet with, and incredible brands to learn and network with. So we look forward to bringing the community together again in wonderful Barcelona in June.